Hey folks, so I thought I would make a kind of a tutorial video, I guess, on how I make handmade dials. This can be done with any number of metals. More often than not, it's going to be copper or brass. But just thought I would kind of document my process in case anybody's interested in trying it. And we'll start out with pointing out some of the main components that I've got here, and then we'll cut into a couple different aspects of doing it. So the first thing you're going to want to decide is what you're going to make the dial out of as far as the material. In this case, I've got 0.4 millimeter rolled copper that I'll cut down into kind of a rectangle, big enough for a dial, and I'll work with that, and then ultimately I'll cut the actual dial out of that. But this is 0.4 millimeter. More often than not, you might want to do like a 0.5 or a 0.6, depending on whether or not you plan on sanding it down. In this case, the way I'm going to do it, I'm not going to worry about sanding it, so 0.4 is fine. I've got tin snips for cutting it. I have a stainless steel anvil for hammering on it. And then I've got an assortment of different types of texture hammers that I can use. In this case, we'll probably be using the straight edge hammers. Here I've got a right angle that I'm going to use basically to do kind of a sector pattern on the dial because of the way that I'm going to do the design on it. I just want to make sure I've got quadrants. I'm going to use that. And then I've got a propane torch and a heat block that I can use for annealing, because when you're hammering metal over time, it gets what's known as work hardened. So basically the crystal structure in the metal rearranges itself every time you beat on it with the hammer. And it becomes harder, but it also becomes brittle. So periodically you want to stop. You want to heat up the metal, which basically softens it, anneal it. And you want to do that on something that's not going to catch on fire, ideally. So I'll cut out the metal, and then we'll come back to this and look at the hammering. Okay, so this is rolled copper. Again, it's 0.4 millimeter thick. I'm going to basically cut out a sheet that I can work with. I don't really worry too much about making sure I've got a right angle on this or anything, and I just kind of eyeball it, knowing that ultimately I'm going to want enough of a width on this to be able to cut out, in this case, a 28.5 millimeter diameter dial. So if I come down around this area with my snips, I should have plenty of width on it. And so we'll just cut across this. And from this, I should actually be able to do 2 dials. So put that to the side. And that's the piece. And you'll notice it's a little bit bent, which in this case is fine because we're going to end up hammering it anyhow. So it's going to bend up, and then we'll have to anneal it and flatten it. Just be careful when you're doing this. The edges will be sharp, so you don't want to cut yourself. And we'll get started here in just a minute on laying out the pattern, and then we'll start hammering. Okay, so here you can see I've drawn a bit of crosshair to give me some sectors on the piece of copper. Ignore the top line. That one wasn't quite centered enough for me, so I drew a second one. But basically, the way I'll be hammering using this hammer, that basically does a kind of a straight line indentation, is I'll be doing some basically on the x-axis, then the y-axis, then the x-axis, then the y-axis. Haven't tried this before, so should be interesting to see how this works out. And this is the stainless steel anvil. And so let's see. We assume that's going to be the center. That one we can go that way, that one we can go that way. So we'll just start it out this way and see how it goes. And basically all you do is decide on your edge, go with a slightly thinner one, and then And what you'll notice is that as we work, you can see the piece starts to curl and deform. And so here in a minute, I'll stop, I'll heat it with the torch to anneal it, and then flatten it out a little bit using a rawhide hammer. So I'll do some more work, and then I'll come back when I'm ready to anneal. All right, and here's what we look like so far. I'm going to go in that way, that way, that way, that way. And so now we're going to anneal it, flatten it out, and then decide if we need to do more. We get it just about red hot, and then we quench it. And cold enough to touch. And we can take a rawhide mallet. Taps along the back. And now it's flat again. Of course, now it needs to be cleaned off because it's got some scale on it. And be careful of your block because your block is hot too. But blend, we'll clean it up, take another look at it, see if it needs some more hammering. And what I'm doing to clean it is just dipping it back in the water, and then I have a brass bristle brush. I'm just going over the workpiece with, clean a little bit of that scale off. It gives us a little bit of a cleaner view of it. And I think I probably will hammer it a little bit more just to see what we can see. Okay, so I've been working on two dials. The original one that we started on, and then I did another one with a slightly different pattern. This one I've gone ahead and drilled a pinion hole or a center hole in. And then the next step is going to be cutting out the actual blank from the material. If you don't have access to a CNC or a laser, there are still a couple ways that you can do this. One, of course, you can always cut it by hand with tin snips. That is a little bit of a pain because you're never going to get a perfectly round circle. The way that I've been doing this is I use a jeweler's die cutter. You can get these for circles, squares, all kinds of shapes. But what you'll find is that if you get one of these cutters with a 1 1/8 inch die on it, that's about as close as you can get to a 28.5 millimeter dial. So if you're doing Seiko builds, even some others, if the case takes a 28.5 millimeter dial, it's a great way to do it. They're not overly expensive. You can get these off Amazon for, I think, like $100, maybe a little bit less. And basically what happens is they come with, grab one of these. They come with these metal dies that basically slip in, and normally what you do is you would hammer it. So you would just take a mallet and just smash down on it, and that basically presses the circle out of it. What I'm going to try doing is this little mini desktop press that I've got, and we'll see how that works. But one thing that I did do is I took just a garbage dial that I had to use as a template and put it on the metal, lined up the center holes, and then drew a Sharpie around it. So when I'm putting this in the cutter, I can line it up. So let me get this set up, and then we'll come back and see how this works. Okay, so I have the piece in there. One thing that you want to make sure when you put it in you want to put the face of the metal down. You don't want it facing up, because otherwise when you put the die in, the cutter in, you're going to potentially damage the front of it, and so you don't want to damage your design. So you just put it in there face down, tighten it down, and then what we take is a little bit of this cut lube, and we just put this on our piece, on our die, which will help to slide through. All right, we're going to stick this in. Put this in the press. Lined up about center as much as possible. And it went through. Press it all the way down. And we'll release. Let's see how this came out. The piece is still in there a little bit. So what we can do, actually, so we don't scratch up the face, let's put that in there. Alright, so we should have it at the bottom. Still sticking in there a little bit, so we'll do this. And there we go. And there we have a dial. Now we'll end up needing to clean up the edge a little bit with a Dremel, but that's the basic idea. And then we'll pickle this to clean it up as well, which will clean off all that scale. Okay, so came back, did a little bit of cleanup on the back with the Dremel, made sure the edges were decent and flat. So the next step is going to be putting this in a pickle solution, and the pickle will basically clean off all the scale and have it looking like shiny copper again. And then after that, we're probably going to age it, which will give it a slightly different darkened color, but then we'll come back with a little bit of sandpaper, or possibly just tumble it in the rock tumbler, which will take it off of the raised edges, just leave it in the valleys. It should have a nice little patina to it. All right, so next step, after having cut out the two dials using the press, is we're going to pickle them. And pickling is basically, it's a solution, an acid solution, that will clean off any heat scale or anything like that on the copper. You can also use it if you're making dials out of silver, brass, and a few other options. But basically, we'll just dip it in the pickle solution, and this is what I use. Nature's Touch citric acid pickle. You just mix about 1/3 of a cup of that with 2 cups of water. Works a little better if you heat up the water. But yeah, it just takes a few seconds, so we'll just drop these in. Should just take a few seconds. We'll just drop those in the pickle. Let them sit for a bit. And let my pickle sit a little bit longer than I had anticipated. So it's not quite as warm as it was. So it's taking a little bit longer. So I'll come back in just a minute and show you the final results. Okay, after a little time in the pickle, there are the two dials cleaned up. And the next step is going to actually be putting them in a liver of sulfur solution to add patina, or basically darken them up again. So yeah, we'll come back as we get that started. Okay, next step, we're going to mix up some liver of sulfur gel. And with sulfur in the name, you can imagine this stuff does stink. So I would definitely recommend not doing this in your house. Mix that up. And we'll take our dials. Got a little wire hanger. And we're just going to dip them in the solution and let them sit for a little bit. So just a piece of titanium wire just hooks over the side. Let it sit in the liver of sulfur. You can see it's already starting to darken up. So might take 10, 15 minutes thereabouts. So we'll come back when it's done. All right, we are back. They have been sitting for probably about 5-6 minutes. And as you can see, they've got a nice dark black color to them. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse them off in a little bit of clean distilled water. Get that one over there to dry off. And this one, yep. Yeah, it's got an interesting color to it. So we'll dry these off. And if I let them sit longer, they would actually turn more black. I'm interested to see what this looks like after I tumble them. Actually, that one's got some variation to it. So I'm going to put these things through a rock tumbler for a few minutes, knock the patina off the tops of them, off the raised edges, and we'll see what those look like. Okay, so now we're getting set up to basically going to run the dials through a rock tumbler. So I've got some ceramic media in here, a little bit of water up to about the top of the media, and just a little drop of Dawn dish detergent in here. What I'm going to do is just stick the dials in here, kind of shove them down into the media a little bit, and we're going to close this up. Stick this on here, and we're going to put it on top speed days. We'll leave this 0. We're just going to let it run for about 5 minutes, and we'll let it go. Back in just a few minutes. Okay, and here we go after about 10 minutes in the tumbler. This is what we look like. Not too bad. That one. That one. So what I may end up doing is drilling them for the main indices. I don't know if I'll do applied indices or maybe just do loom plots. But yeah, that's the basic process of making a hand textured dial, and in this case also applying patina to it. So hope you found this interesting, maybe helpful if you decide to try it yourself. Happy to answer any questions in the comments. Take care.